We're back on the Rational Boomer podcast. This show will air on Monday, and I have the great fortune of having yet another guest on the Rational Boomer podcast. We have Ilona with us. Now, Ilona's never been on the show before, but we've read a number of her emails. She's a very intelligent, articulate, accomplished woman. And Ilona, thanks for joining us on the show. But it's only fair that you come on my show because I did your podcast that hasn't aired yet, but I already recorded it with you and had a great time. Ilona, welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Well, actually, your show is going to be released on Sunday. So you're saying this show will be on Monday?
Yeah. So they can still get it.
Yeah, they'll definitely be able to get it. So I started a podcast because I'm trying to do new things as an aging boomer. I wanted to sort of challenge myself. So I started a newsletter through Substack, and then I invited some guests, and I focused on female guests because I feel like we don't have enough of a voice. But then I thought, it would be really interesting. It would be Mike. And I decided to break my rule about having only women, and I invited you. So you're sort of in the middle of, I have 10 episodes, and you're right in the middle. So we let you in, Mike.
So are you saying that, Mike's a male, but we can tell he's in touch with his female side. So he gets a pass and comes on the show. Yeah.
Yes. We have feminine and masculine. Some of us have more of one than the other.
Yeah.
Yes. So we let you in the club.
So what's your background, Ilona? I know you've done a lot of things in your life, and maybe you can explain that so people can contrast somebody who's done a lot of things to a big dumb white guy sitting in his living room.
Oh, I don't know, Mike. You've done a few things too, but when you get this old, you eventually, come to the end of the long career of having to, raise your family, and you have to do certain things to do that. Unfortunately, I worked for the government for 10 years, worked for DOD and civilian agencies, and I was in the purchasing department, in the contracts department, and then I had my own business for a while like you did, and then I went back and I worked for defense contractors. And again, this time I worked opposite the government, and I think we all know that the government's kind of screwed up. And so it was a very challenging type of work because you could rarely get anything done. Just like Congress.
I work for government entities too, not on a federal level, but more on a state level. And I was constantly frustrated that the inefficiencies and the bureaucracy, and like you say, nothing got done. And I'm sure, like me, you had a hard time holding your tongue, saying, "Oh, wait the fucking minute. You're wasting a lot of money." But they didn't want to hear that stuff.
Yeah. So the agencies that I worked for, they were very political. So when a new president would come in, then we'd get a new head of the agency. And, there were the usual group of talking heads that ran the agency, but we always get a new leader, and we had to do different things to make that person happy. But it always would change depending on who was in power. So we definitely directly felt that, and our priorities would change. And you can't really get things done when things are always like up in the air. You don't know, yeah.
Well, if there are Trump-fucks out there listening, I know what they're saying. They're saying, "See, I knew it. Those motherfuckers are into the deep state. We're deep state." I don't even know what the hell the deep state is, but I can tell you in my position, whatever government position I had no fucking power. If I had power, we might have been able to do something. And I sense the same thing with you.
We all just wanted to get our jobs done and to accomplish something, all for the good of people and our country and keeping it safe. And it was a very, constantly obstacles. Just never could get anything done. And that's why I actually left the government, because I said, I'm going to be banging my head against the wall for the rest of my life. I can't do this. It's not healthy. So I left, but
yeah, it gets frustrating. So now I don't know exactly how old you are, but I think we're in the same range.
I'm 60 for another 2 weeks.
You're 60. I'm 64, so I'm a bit ahead of you. Had we been in high school together, you probably would have been too young to ask to the prom. Ninth grade would have been a little young. 10th grade, different story. But
I was a
anyway,
nerd, Mike. You would not have noticed me.
really?
Glasses, yeah, it was not good.
I don't know. I got along with everybody. But do you have the same sense I do now that we're become a certain age? We aren't encumbered by jobs and bosses and even friend groups. Do you feel some freedom now that you can come out and say the things you want, say the things you believe without worrying about any kind of retribution? Is that what kind of brought you to listening to the Rational Boomer podcast, to doing your podcast and that sort of thing?
100%. I feel much freer. I post on LinkedIn a lot and I don't have a boss. So I feel like I can write very freely on there. And I know years ago, I would never have done that because you don't know if you have a customer looking over your shoulder or you have your boss or a coworker who wants your demise, you know. So I definitely feel so free now. And, you know, even though I do have Trump lovers in my family, I don't necessarily have the freedom in conversational, but in my writing, I just put it out there. I'm like, too
Right.
bad, you know?
Right. It's interesting. Um, I've said before that I think for me and of course for you too, we are some of the few people that truly enjoy the benefit of our First Amendment. Because while government can't technically stop you from saying the things you can say, your bosses can, your friends can, your family can, your situations can. So people feel they're not willing to speak their minds always, and I think that's a problem in this country. If more people actually spoke their minds, we might be in a better place instead of just being apathetic and sitting back and going, yeah, whatever, I'll deal with it. But I feel like you and I and people like us are some of the few that actually have a First Amendment right.
Right. And we don't have to worry about, you know, not getting, you know, getting fired or whatever. But I do notice that the young people, I think, are having some boundaries. They're putting some things in place with their bosses and they're speaking up in ways that we did not. For example, they finish when they're finished work at 5 o'clock, they're finished. And,
Oh,
you know, we would never, our generation, if our boss said, you got to stay this thing is done, I don't care if it's 5 o'clock. Some of them are not feeling the vibes on that. They're like, no, I'm done at 5 o'clock and you won't hear from me till tomorrow. So it's a different, I think there's an awakening that this isn't right how we had to, you know, live our lives as slaves to the man. You know, it's different.
well, there definitely is a transition going on. Like you said, when we first started our jobs, we were among 30 or 40 interviewees. We hoped to God we got the job. And then when we got the job, we were so appreciative to have the job to pay the
Yeah.
bills. We did anything we have absolutely could do. We'd work extra time and not get paid for it. We'd take shit that we wouldn't normally take. And I think you're right. There's a different paradigm going on now with employers and employees. And I think it's a good shift. It's finally bringing some equality back to the employee. And I think that's kind of a sense of how the country's going too. Maybe the power is going back to the people as opposed to the elite who constantly dictate our lives.
Well, when I got my first job in the government right out of college, my parents were ecstatic because they thought that I would stay there forever
Yeah.
and that I had the job. But I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it. So I did leave and they were like warning me, oh, you should never leave. But I noticed as my career went on and I started working with younger people, the government is having trouble keeping young people in those jobs because they don't want to put up with that stuff.
Right, right.
So.
Absolutely. Well, your parents looked at the job and a career differently than kids look at it now. They didn't care about the job. All they cared about is you've got job security, you're getting paid a decent wage, you've got some benefits, and you got a pension.
Mhm, mhm.
That was the win for them at that point. As far as happiness in the job, we had people back in the old days working in coal mines and sweeping floors, and they were just happy to have some kind of security with the job. And when it got to you, they said, this is perfect. I've said the same thing to my son. My son has a job in government and he has a pension. And I say, man, pensions are a game changer. I have a pension, my wife has a pension, but a lot of people don't. It makes a huge difference no matter what that pension is. So I said, try to stick with the pension, but life is more than that, than the money and the security. And I think
Yeah,
kids are seeing that.
I came in the government after they ended the pensions. So I was like 1 year past the pensions. And I was in the other program where I had to save in an IRA. I forget what they called it. It's a different word in the government. But so anyway, I
Yeah.
had to save for my own retirement. And, I was thinking about this and I wanted to ask you about this. So we're, as baby boomers who have to not necessarily live on a pension, but have to live on our retirement savings, we're so hooked in to the stock market and how well it's doing and how well our investments are that we're kind of gassing up corporations to operate in the ways that they're operating so that they're optimizing, shareholder value. And, I want to see the prices going up. But in the same time, it's hurting all these people down here, the employees in particular. They're not benefiting from the high CEOs' salaries, from the high price of the shares, from the buybacks. They're suffering because of this. And I feel like it's not a good situation what we've gotten into. Now I have to pay for myself. I want the prices to go high, but it's hurting the other people.
Right. It does seem to be a contradiction. Those of us that have investments for our retirement, we want the stock market to go up. But in order for the stock market to go up, they have to be greedy motherfuckers robbing the middle class. So we're benefiting from their greed, but we don't like their greed. It's like, it's like a common scam. They trap you into something that you agree with but don't agree with, and you really can't make a choice to get out. It's ingenious, actually, what they've done. And stuff like that has to change. I mean, there are better ways where we can all benefit and greed doesn't have to come into play. But as I've said, once we get some power in DC, in the House, the Senate, and in the presidency, if people think everything's gonna be all better because of what the Republicans did, the minute we have that power, it's not going to be. There's a lot of work that has to be done, a lot of changes, a lot of mindsets that have to be changed. We got a lot of fucking work to do because the Democrats aren't always on our side completely either. Um, we're just digging out of the hole now, and that's the important thing is we've got to be able to see that, and I think finally people are actually seeing what's going on.
Yeah, I noticed that there were 22 Democrats who didn't vote for the bill, the budget. And I don't
Right.
know who they are, but I didn't know why they didn't stick together on that.
Well, it's weird. We should mention that the budget bill did pass, so there isn't going to be a government shutdown. I've said that all along. There never was going to be a government shutdown because the Republicans would take too much heat, too much blame for it. They weren't going to let it happen. They were just going to be tough guys and double down and play hardball. But in the end, they would fold up, which is what they did. Not even really fold up. They did the one thing that they're not supposed to do is to work with the Democrats, which is ironic because Congress, the essence of Congress is compromise and negotiation. But where we're at now, we have two sides, never the twain shall meet. So now when this happens, this upsets people, the MAGA people and the crazies in our Congress.
When did this happen I mean, was it through Donald Trump that his regime that we stopped working together? Like, it's ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense that you separate and we can never come together. I mean, it's insane.
Well, it is. And I don't think it was Donald Trump where it started. It just became inflamed with Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell had been kind of fueling this. Even Ronald Reagan back in the day was kind of creating that separation. It's been a slow process, but it's really come to a head now. And it's just not working. So we don't have a shutdown. Marjorie Taylor Greene is angry about this, as you mentioned before we went on. And now she's calling for a vote of no confidence with Mike Johnson. The good news is that thankfully Congress is going to take a 2-week vacation because, God, they've been working hard. And so they won't even do anything about that for a couple of weeks. But Did it surprise you that she's asking for the vote of no confidence?
I was sort of waiting for it. I always wondered when she was going to pull that card out because, the MAGAs want to be in power and they've been, fucking around with the Ukraine money for so long and that's still sitting right on the floor. They haven't moved that. And I was waiting for her to play the card.
Well, and this, the ironic thing is that she's mad at Mike Johnson because he actually worked for the Democrats to get the bill passed. She's mad at him about that. But she also put the Democrats in the driver's seat in as far as uh, whether or not Mike Johnson gets kicked out. The thing about it is because the margin is so slim, if Marjorie Taylor Greene does want to get Mike Johnson kicked out, ironically, she's going to need the Democrats to help her. The very thing she's pissed off about that Johnson did with the bill. But this opens up a possibility for the Democrats. The Democrats can say, Mike, we're going to save you, but we got to get this Ukraine fucking thing done now, and the Israeli thing done now. We'll save you,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you got to get that thing passed. If you're
I
going to
hope
go
that
in,
that's
go all in.
Yeah, I hope that's our chance now to get that going because of this. But then what's going to happen with him? I mean, if he's out and maybe we'll get a couple more Republican congressmen to leave, and then what'll happen? I'm so excited about that. And I'm excited about Monday when Donnie runs out of money.
Well, in terms of the Congress, we were talking about that too. Ken Buck decides to leave. Mike Gallagher leaves. Now they're in kind of a two-vote margin. They can't afford to lose more than two people, whether it be trying to kick um, Mike Johnson out or pass any bill at all. The ominous thing I mentioned to you before we went on to Ken Buck said when he quit and he resigned early to stick it to the Republicans and to Lauren Boebert, he said, I won't be the last one. And he was right because Mike Gallagher came out. But these people that consider themselves regular Republicans are pretty upset about MAGA destroying their party. It wouldn't be surprising if two or three more people said, yeah, I had a fuck enough. And then all of a sudden, Mike Johnson doesn't have to be worrying about getting kicked out as Speaker of the House because now Hakeem Jeffries would be.
Oh my God, that's a beautiful dream. I
It
love it.
is. And I don't think it's unreasonable to think because some of these Republicans that are leaving now are just absolutely upset, throw their hands up in the air, and realize that their party is destroyed. So you might as well sink it all the way.
What's that crazy guy, George, the liar that they kicked out of Congress? What was his name?
George Santos?
Oh, yeah. So now he wants to run as an independent. Did you see that?
I did.
Oh my God.
I
What
did.
an idiot.
He's kind of a Donald Trump light. I think the only he knows he can't win the election when he runs again, but he's also on the hook for some criminal cases on trial. And I suppose he thinks that if he's running for something while he's on trial or prior to becoming on trial, that maybe he can delay things. George, I got to tell you, you're not Donald Trump. You're not a former president. You're a dipshit, lying piece of shit, and you're going to fucking jail. So you can run if you want. You'll lose, but you'll end up in the same place.
Have you heard anything about Mark Meadows recently, or is he like,
No, I haven't heard anything about him. I mean, he's going to play a big role it's ironic. He's going to play a big role in the Washington, D.C. case because he pled out. He cut a deal,
oh, he
but he
did?
did not cut a deal down in Georgia. So he could go to jail in Georgia. He's probably going to stay out of jail in D.C. He is kind of the linchpin here because he was the one, at least during January 6th, that was right next to Donald Trump. He knew everything. Everybody that talked to Donald Trump went through, it all went through him. Donald Trump to Meadows to whoever to Meadows to Donald Trump. Meadows knows everything. He has all the text messages. And when it comes down to these superseding indictments for the sitting members of Congress, Mark Meadows is going to be the star of the show for the DOJ.
What happened now with Fani though? Like now that she's out of the woods, she can bring the case, or what is that
Yeah.
going forward now?
Yeah, in fact, she's asking to start the case this summer. It'll be interesting to see what this judge does. I was talking to Old Soul on the show, and she brought up something kind of interesting that I hadn't thought about. McAfee, the judge down in Georgia, seemed to be pretty straight. But he is Republican. He is with the Federalist Society, so there are some problems with that. But then all of a sudden, he started getting a little hinky and slowing things down. And I wasn't sure what changed that. But Old Soul made a good point. He's up for a reelection in 2024 too. So he
He's
can't
that young
afford.
guy. He's
Yeah,
kind of
he's a
young,
young guy.
right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
he can't afford to piss off the Trump-fucks and the Republicans. So he's trying to ride the fence. I don't know if he'd go as far as Aileen Cannon and just try to run it off the rails, but I think he's going to play it both sides for a little bit up through the election. But eventually that's got to get started. Uh, they are appealing. Donald Trump, of course, is appealing the decision not to disqualify um, Fonnie Willis, but that doesn't seem to stop the process. Donald Trump loves those appeals, and everybody says, "Oh my God, he's going to appeal." Well, for the last 3 years, he's been appealing everything. How many has he won? Zero, because he's got no basis for it. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's all going to be very very interesting. You mentioned about the money. The money. It's Monday, so the money is due today.
Can I gloat? Can I be like ecstatic today, or is something going to happen that's going to let him off the hook? Let me be happy, Mike. I want to be happy.
I know you do. I know you do. I won't say, because we're recording this on Saturday, I can't say that he won't come up with the money. I will say that he kind of screwed himself. He's asking for delays and stays on this thing. And then he goes out in True Social because he's getting a little antsy and says, "Hey, I got the $500 million. I'm a hero. Yay for me." Well, that fucks him over because he doesn't have the $500 million. If he did, it would already be done. Um, there's no indication that he has any kind of cash like that. Um, but if you're asking for a stay and you say, "I have the money," why are they going to give you a stay? I mean, the whole reason he's was fined $464 million is because he sat there on the fucking stand and lied and said, "Yeah, I got 400 or 500 million in cash." Okay, cool. Then this will be easy for you. He does this to himself all the time. Um, and no matter what happens today, whether he comes up with the money or not, it's still a bad day for Donald Trump.
Um, I think you talked about this already, but I know you said $500 million. They need something back. Like if it were
Yeah,
Russia, he's not going to just get it. But like I just think about when my kids, were buying houses, and I helped them. I gave them some money, and I had to write a note saying, um, "I don't expect repayment of this. This is a gift." But like they had to support the money that they were using for the house,
right.
right? He needs to be accountable if he does get some inflow of money. I mean, it has to be legitimate money. In my mind, as a public person, as a taxpayer, he should not just, I don't know, I'm expecting it to rain down from Elon Musk or something. I don't know.
Well, like I said before, with Elon Musk, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong Un, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, these guys aren't Donald Trump's buddy. Donald Trump is not a likable guy. They don't like Donald Trump. Everything with Donald Trump up to this point has been transactional. I'll help this clown because I'll get something. Rich people don't like Donald Trump, but they think they'll make more money by getting better tax breaks if Donald Trump's there as opposed to Joe Biden. But Donald Trump has run out of influence. He's run out of power. He's not the president. As much as he thinks he'll win the presidency, maybe people give him money in hopes that he'll win the presidency. But if anybody has any intelligence, and if you have $1 billion, you must have some, you can see the writing on the wall. There is no way for Donald Trump to win the presidency. It's just going to get worse. So investing in Donald Trump is not a good move. It doesn't make any sense. There's nothing to get back other than to say fuck you to the country. But the important thing is, if he gets the money from somebody else, it's not like he's been saved. Now he's encumbered to somebody else. And when that appeal fails, they're taking that fucking money, and now he owes that person money, and they're going to start selling his shit. There's really no way out for Donald Trump. Whether somebody saves him with this money or not, it's still coming out of his ass one way or another, ultimately.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I saw your TikToks about the Truth Social
Yeah.
and how that money's supposed to make him a billionaire a few times over. Of course, it's not imminent, right? But I mean, is this something that he can use to his advantage right now?
No, no, it's not. I mean, that's the thing is if you watch the TV news, oh my God, he's got a merger with World Digital or whatever the fuck it is, and they're going to take it at IPO and it's going to be worth $5 billion. Well, who gave that valuation? Donald Trump did. What do we know Donald Trump's famous for? Inflating, talking bullshit, hyping things up. The thing is that um, since that time, there's been a long process. There's been SEC investigations. There's still a couple of lawsuits working. So it's not like this is happening today, the agreement, and then they're going to go IPO tomorrow. It's not going to happen that way. There's too many hurdles, too many people slowing things down. But even if he gets the IPO, and even if there is a lot of money, he can't really touch the money for 6 to 8 months. And after that, he only can do that in increments. So it's not like he's going to get $5 billion. Now, the other thing is, well, can he use that for collateral in a loan like a bond? So he says, well, I'm going to get 5 billion. Give me the
Yeah,
loan.
yeah.
He can't do that. He can't do that with that money. He really doesn't have access to that money for quite a while, and then only in small pieces once he does. It's not going to help him. It's just Donald Trump doing Donald Trump, like saying at the last minute, I have $500 million. Donald Trump biggest fear is being embarrassed and being exposed for being a fraud. So he will walk it up to the last minute saying, yeah, I'm rich, I'm famous, until he can't say it anymore. And then after that, he'll still say it,
Mhm.
even
Mhm.
though everybody knows it's not true. It's some kind of mental deficiency. And I've seen it before in my dad and other people I know, and they just won't give it up. But Donald Trump has done that thing, that true social thing won't work because when they had the valuations early on, they had all these hopes and dreams. But when it comes down to it, what does True Social have? Maybe 2 million users. It's been failing every year. It's failing. It's losing a little bit of money. It didn't take off like they thought it would. So to suggest it had the value that they projected in the beginning to now, it's not worth billions of dollars. It's probably worth less than a billion.
Right. They said that I have this article from Jay Quo, and he says that he has 400,000 individual investors in Truth Social,
Yeah.
and they're driving up the price, sort of like the GameStop
Yeah.
thing, and they're calling it a riding the meme stock wave. So they're just gassing it up because of emotion and the whole Trump thing. Like, it's not worth what it's. They lost how many million last year? Let me see. I have it here. 30 million. Lost over 30 million through the third quarter of 2023. So it's not doing well.
No, it's not doing well, and it's just hype that Donald Trump typically does, and then the media grabs onto it. Oh my God, that sounds scary. So let's report it as if it's fact. Everything Donald Trump does is bullshit or a lie, and always hyped up to make him look good.
And the
Um,
bullshit sneakers, now they can't even get rid of them for $99 a pair. It was 300, now it's 99.
well, now now he's got perfume or cologne, which I
Oh,
don't was
dirty diaper cologne.
yeah, I think it's called. I think the two colognes are called uh, shit and flop sweat.
Oh my
Get me a couple ounces of that flop sweat. I'm not miserable enough.
gosh. Oh
But
my gosh.
no, so Donald Trump. is hyping things up to make it look good. He will do that to the very end, to the day he walks into a prison. He'll be telling you how great he is and how good he has it. But in the end, it will.
Can't wait. Can't wait
It,
for that day, Mike.
yeah. Well, I mean, this day today is kind of a big day. He got the 91 million for E. Jean Carroll. But if he doesn't get the money now, they are attaching a lot of his properties. They may not go in and grab them and take them right away, but there will be liens and they will take access to them. Um, but that'll be the day. That'll be the day when Donald Trump gets exposed for the fraud he is. He keeps talking about having the money, but he won't have the money. If he gets the money, the nice thing is wherever that money came from, out of his pocket, out of somebody else's pocket, it's locked up. Nobody can touch it. And it will never be returned because they won't win the appeal. It'll sit there, it'll delay the inevitable. And then when the appeal loses, that money gets sucked out. Donnie Trump standing there with his dick in his hand, and the person who gave him his money has to figure out how to get it back from Donald Trump. And good luck with that.
Well, I pay my bills, so I'm not familiar with like the lien process, but I think once the government has a lien on it, isn't there like a conservator who starts making decisions for that property? Like he loses control, right? Once
Well,
this happens.
he's already got that. He's got it's in receivership. He has a moderator so that anything he does with his company has to go through that moderator first. So if he's trying to play some game to get money to post this bond, that moderator has to know. And if it's shady or a little shaky, they're going to say, no, you can't do it. They have the power to stop all that. So Donald Trump's in a weird position. He loves control. He's a control freak, and he has no control over his own company. He's going to be. You can see now that he's a little shook. You know, he's not talking clearly. He's worse than he normally has. And this is what I've said all along. I said, this is too much pressure for a 78-year-old man who's not healthy mentally or physically. The pressure is going to get to him. You're going to take all his money away. You're going to take all his power away. And then you're going to put him on a criminal trial in about a month with 34 felony charges. Now, you're a younger, vital woman. I'm younger than he is. How do you think we would do that with that kind of pressure hanging over our head? Could we even do anything? We would
No,
be
because we're
paralyzed.
honest people. And if we're not being honest, then we can't live properly. We're nervous, we're upset, we get sick. I mean, I would be sick. I would be
Yeah,
sick, physically sick if I were him. You know, I noticed that ever since the State of the Union address that President Biden, no one's talking about how old President Biden is
right.
because he was great. And let's look at Donald Trump. He sounds like a buffoon. He doesn't make sense. He's making up words. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. Who, except these people that are having issues. I don't know. The Trump supporters, I don't understand why they think this is a good thing because clearly it is not.
No, it's not. And, you know, you can talk about the polls and all this stuff. Well, people still love Donald Trump. There's other ways to look at support for Donald Trump. I don't trust polls. They told us about a red wave in 2022. They said that Donald Trump would win in 2020. They said that Hillary Clinton would win in 2016. So they don't have a real good track record. But you know, one good point in telling how people support uh, is in fundraising. Donald Trump's always been a big champion of, oh, he can get all this money and has all this fundraising. Well, in the past 3 months, Donald Trump has only fundraised half as much
Yeah.
as Joe
Biden
Biden.
has 155 million and Trump has 74 million.
Right. So he's struggling financially. Um, Donald Trump was going to have a big rally in Arizona. He canceled it, not because he
I
was busy,
heard.
because he couldn't afford it.
And now he's tapping into the RNC. That is ridiculous.
Well, it is ridiculous, mainly because the RNC doesn't have that much money. It shows
He
you how
needs way
desperate he
more.
is.
He needs way more than the RNC had, but he has to. He's draining them of every penny.
He's draining them of every penny, and I'm all for it. Because the
Right.
more he does that, the more he destroys the Republican Party in
The
total.
whole party is going down.
I mean, what's going to happen in November when Donald Trump has drained all his money? It's going to legal fees. He can't use any money to campaign, and all the money intended to go to reps and senators and legislators and governors doesn't exist. RNC gives nobody any help because Donald Trump drained things.
Do they normally really support candidates? Like, is that necessary for a candidate to have the RNC funding?
I don't think all candidates, but I think important candidates.
So the ones that they really need for
Right.
strategic purposes, yeah.
Right. Like during the Senate thing in 2022, there were senators like well, there were the two in Pennsylvania. Uh, the writer, what's his name? He's a dipshit. And then there was Dr. Oz. I think they gave the writer some money and he won. And Dr. Oz, they knew he was going to lose, so they didn't give him much money. But RNC is there to support other people other than the president. And now that Laura Trump is the co-chair, she said everything's going to Donald Trump. And it's just going down the toilet because he can't even use the money to campaign. It's just to save his ass legally.
I wonder if this is like me talking out of my ass. If Nikki Haley has all that money, could she give that to Trump? She still has money in her war chest, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I think she could. I don't think she will. I mean, Donald Trump, that's yet another mistake that Donald Trump made. Donald Trump said, well, if you're voting for Nikki Haley, I don't need you. I don't want you to come to my side. I don't want your money, which is a dumb thing. We're finding out in primaries where he's unopposed, he still gets 25% of the people voting against him, not willing to vote for him. And that's where the big problem lies for Donald Trump is that uh, if you're running for election, you need unity in your party and you need some independence. Well, he's already lost the independents, and apparently he's lost 25% of the Republican Party who are willing to vote for him because they've had enough of his shit. You factor those two things, he can't win. If you can't get your entire party behind you, you lose.
I wonder what would happen though if, something happens to him, bad, that he can no longer run.
Fingers crossed.
Like, would Nikki Haley be the person, and would she get enough momentum to take it away from Joe Biden?
If I had my preference to what happens, I would hope that Donald Trump stays the nominee up through about August or September. And then something happens where he drops out. So they have to scramble the last month or two to get somebody in there. Nikki Haley seems like uh, the presumptive nominee, but I don't think it will be.
Yeah,
I mean,
because they hate women and they hate diversity.
immigrants.
They hate everything. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't like her, and she's talking against MAGA, and as long as she's talking against MAGA, they're going to try to throw a wrench into it. But that's the thing. Who do they have? They focused everything on Donald Trump, who is an absolute criminal, corrupt loser. And if he goes away, they have nobody that's going to garner enough interest. It's funny how people will say, well, if this person, if he'll beat Trump, but if somebody else comes in, it might be tougher for Joe Biden. No, it won't. Somebody pulled out of the blue, Mitt Romney or whoever. Nobody's going to beat Joe Biden this time around because it's all about Donald Trump, but the problems of Donald Trump have seeped into all of the Republican Party. And I don't care what Republican runs against Joe Biden, they're going to fucking lose.
Praying.
Well,
Please.
well, we talk about the abortion issue, and they embrace the abortion issue, and 75% of the country supports Roe v. Wade. Just based on that, how do you win an election? If you're supporting pro-life and 75% of the country disagrees with you, and it's an important issue. It's a feminine issue. It's taking constitutional rights away from 50% of the country, which is women. Now, I've been married for 40 years. You don't pull that shit and not expect to get some retribution out of it. And women don't forget about that shit. I'm dealing as a guy married 40 years. If I get in the wrong argument, I'm dealing with my sins from the fucking 80s. She remembers it all. And women are going to be the strongest thing the Democrats have. So they better protect that.
How strong do you think the Christian nationalists are? I mean, because they're the ones behind the abortion thing.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
I don't think they're that strong. I don't. I think they're a loud minority, and the Republicans see them as valuable. But if we're looking at Donald Trump's base, which is 25, 27%, and those are the evangelicals, they're strong in a sense that they maybe cover 25%, but that's not enough to win anything, especially when the other 75% is the opposite of what they are.
Hmm, hmm.
It's, I don't see them as strong. I see them as getting weaker every day, every
Oh,
day.
really?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, they're being exposed for who they are and the shit they do and how it works against the vast majority of the people in this country, and people are getting tired of it.
I
I
used
think.
to be,
Well,
I
go
used
ahead.
to be one of those right-wing people years ago. I was very Republican, and I voted on the abortion issue because I thought it was wrong. And I feel like now they're doing a lot better job on explaining what abortion is, and I feel like the science is there to support what it's not a baby, it's an electrical signal, it's not a heartbeat. Like they're giving so much more information, and the image that they're projecting is so much more clear than when the right wing Christian nationalists say, "You're killing babies. Oh my gosh,
Right,
it's
right.
not that. It's not a baby. Like, stop it."
Well, and that's a good point. We can talk about that after this break. It's all about information, and this is the information age. We all have much more information. Donald Trump has brought to light a lot of things that always been under the radar, and he brought them up to the surface like a fucking fever blister, and now we know. So that does have some bearing. I tell you what, Ilona, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Listener Ilona is on the program today. And I was looking forward to this because she's a very bright, articulate woman. She has some interesting insights, and we have some similarities. We're in our 60s, a time when our kids and young people would hope for us to just go sit in the back and be quiet. But it seems like you and I have a difficult time shutting our mouths, and thank God for that. Um, we were talking about uh, our kids, and you honestly feel like we are kind of responsible for doing what we're doing in terms of dealing with the exposing of government and trying to fix things. It's almost our responsibility to do it for our kids.
Definitely. I didn't have time or interest when I was raising my family, and maybe that's why things are the way they are, because I was so apathetic. And even though I worked in the government, I knew a lot of what was going on, but nothing was too terrible. Nothing was too terrible to get
Right.
me to act. And now I have more time, like you. I have time. I don't have a job that I have to go to every day. And I got sucked into the Mike vortex on TikTok, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I'm so grateful to you, first for coming on my podcast, but second, you really have given me so much of an education. And I just feel like I relearned everything that I learned in high school but didn't care about. When you learn about government and the House and the Senate, I'm like, what? What's this? Like, it doesn't mean anything to you when you're 18, unless something it touches your life in a certain way. But now I'm learning everything all over again, and I feel responsible for being apathetic for so many years, and I see that things are not great for my kids. It was so hard for them, my two daughters, to get their first house. There was a lack of supply, and they just couldn't get started, and I felt so terrible about it. And the student loan situation is horrible, and it's not the same for them as it was for us. I felt like I could get on my feet when I was in my late 20s, 30s, when I got married and bought a house and had a family. It was easier than it is now for the kids. And I feel responsible now to kind of rectify my years of apathy to, make sure Donald Trump never returns to office. I was an independent voter for years because I was totally disgusted with both parties. But I did change registration to Democrat so that I feel like I can vote in local elections. And I'm going to start from local government and really try to impact, because it's insane what the Republicans have gotten away with. And because people weren't paying attention, and now I'm friggin' paying attention.
Yeah.
So thanks to you, Mike.
Well, I will tell you this. I'm no different than you are. I was in the same situation, same mindset. And sometimes people give me credit for being smarter than I am because I'm not that smart. The only thing that I have going on here is I have time, I have concern, and I have curiosity. So when I see a story, I dig into the story. I don't know all this stuff. I'm just doing what a teacher does by being a chapter ahead of everybody else and trying to understand what it means and take a look at all the facts. Most people watch news stories, they hear the headline, they go, oh my God, that's terrible. And that's all they know. When I hear that, I go, there's got to be a way out of that motherfucker. So I dig down deeper into it because of curiosity. And I've always done that for my own sanity. So by putting it on TikTok, I'm gratified that other people find some calm and sanity out of it. It just shows the point is that I'm not that smart. There is hope, there is information if you seek it out. It's not just me that finds this stuff secretly
All
on
right,
some
I got
special.
over. You're a curator. You're a curator.
Exactly.
And then you just filter it down to us.
Right. Yeah, I'm not a super brain. There's plenty of people smarter than I am, but it kind of goes back. I think we talked about it on your podcast. It has nothing to do with a high intellect. It has to do with an aptitude, and it's an aptitude that I developed over the years in my life in radio. I was a play-by-play announcer. I watch what's going on, and I try to put it down in simple terms so people can understand what's going on. When I was a traffic reporter, same thing. I watched cameras all over the system. I had to give people a sense of what's going on in traffic. I had to boil it down and spit it out in a way that people could understand it. So the way I did play-by-play and the way I did traffic reports is the same way I deal with the news. I take a look at the big picture. I try to boil it down to the basic facts and try to find some hope or some ideas in it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's a real skill, to be able to stay in the present moment, watch what's happening, and then, put it out in a form that people can understand, because I get emotional, honestly.
Right.
And,
Well,
and
that's
that's
the
the
thing.
worst thing that you can do, is to get emotional. It's, just report. You're an observer, you kind of have a little distance between you and what's happening. And that's so helpful to
Well,
us listeners.
And I think that is the only difference between me and the listeners. For whatever reason, whether it's a negative or a positive, I don't put emotions into things. I don't, I don't get fearful of things. And the reason I don't get fearful of things, and the reason you shouldn't get fearful of things, is we've both gone through some trials and tribulations and tragedies and horrible things, things that we thought would end the world forever, that our lives were over. But you're going to be 61. I'm 64 years. I'll be 64 years old. And guess what? After all those trials and tribulations, here we sit pretty
Mhm.
comfortably talking about the problems of the world. If I can make it through those 64 years, I can make it through whatever's left. And I think that's the case for all of us.
You remember when it went from 1999 to 2000, and how
Yeah.
everybody was panicking? My husband's in the insurance industry. They actually sold insurance for that event. Can you believe it?
Yeah. That was ridiculous. That
But it
was
was what
ridiculous.
people's fears, like, and I think that's what the Republican Party does. They capitalize on a very fearful population. I feel like the people that are Republican are afraid of everything. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of war. And that's the other thing. Like, the Department of Defense is just a huge industrial complex that we have to keep going, because we got a lot of contractors making a lot of money. Look at Boeing, right? With their friggin' doors falling off in the flights.
Right. Well, I was going to say that my wife is very emotional. My kids are kind of emotional. Everybody around my family is a little emotional. They get caught up in fear and anxiety and all this stuff. And they look at me as very weird because I'm not anxious about things. When people say they just don't give a fuck, I'm
Mhm,
one of those people that actually just don't give a fuck. I,
mhm.
I I just let the chips fall where they may, and then deal with it after it happens. I don't worry about shit that I can't control. And I, for whatever reason, can do that. But my wife said to me one time when we were with some people, she says, "Aren't you at least afraid to die?" I go, "Absolutely, I'm not afraid to die." And she goes, "How can you say you're not afraid to die?" I said, "You got to look at it rationally. Hundreds of millions of people have died before me. How fucking hard can it be?"
That's funny because that's what I talk about in my podcast is not my podcast, my newsletter is the fear of dying because we have a lot of people who are afraid of dying and really it's the most natural thing that can happen to us and our bodies are built for the dying process. So I love that about you, Mike.
Well, I learned it from my grandfather. My grand, I had the foresight because I worked in radio, and I should expose this sometime. But when my grandfather was 91 years old, he was probably one of the smartest guys I've ever known. He and I were very close, and I think if I'm similar to anybody in my family, it would be him. But he was 91 years old, and I sat him down and I did an interview with him. I thought it would be interesting that my grandkids or great grandkids would be able to hear about times in history and personal
So
experiences
cool.
from an ancestor they don't know and never met, but now they could see them and hear them. So I talked to my grandfather about World War II. I talked to him about the Depression and all that stuff. And I said to him, I said, "Grandpa, we could talk openly." I said, "Grandpa, you're 91 years old. If you died tonight or tomorrow morning, that wouldn't be a surprise to anybody. So death is imminent for somebody in their 90s, whether it's polite to say or not, it's true. You're not going to live forever. And at 91, time is short. Does this worry you? Are you anxious about it?" And he said to me, he said, "Look, Mike, when you get to be this age, a lot of things hurt. Getting up every day, working and walking and doing all the things is drudgery. It's hard and it's wearing on you." He said, "I've lived to 91. I've done pretty much everything that was expected of me to do, that I wanted to do. I had a wife, I had kids, I have grandkids, I have great grandkids. Everything went pretty well for me. I'm ready to go when that time comes." And I think as you get older, you become more resigned to it and less worried about it. And when he told me that, I said, "Well, I don't trust anybody any more than I trust my grandpa, so I'm just going to go with that."
Mhm, mhm. Well, I plan on living to 100, so I got a few more presidents I got to get through.
Yeah, no shit. No. Well, in your podcast, you're talking to women of a certain age, right? And you're trying
Right,
to,
right. Third chapter. We're calling it the third chapter.
well, I think it's a very opportune time to do that sort of thing because I think finally, because of all that's been exposed by the Republicans, the evangelicals, the whole abortion issue, I think the coming years, the coming decade, may be the decade of women and the power of women. Men have been trying to marginalize the power of women forever. But when you go through this election in November, the power of women, Joe Biden said it to the Supreme Court. "You have no idea how powerful women are, but you're going to find out." That's exactly what he said to the Supreme Court. And I agree with him. There is going to be an awakening for people in this country that want to diminish or marginalize women. They are going to have a come to Jesus moment, and it's going to be hard for them.
Right. And if you think about all the dictators that we've had and the bad players on the global stage, they've all been men. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you can dig up a woman here or there, but that's why I think it's the tide needs to turn because I just feel by our nature, women's nature is more nurturing, empathetic, compassionate. Not that you're not, Mike, but I'm just saying I think that we've swung so far in this direction of masculine energy. I'm talking like woo woo talk, which is how
Well,
I
I
talk.
agree.
Masculine energy And we need to bring it back to something better, because it's not working. It is not
Well,
working for
well,
most of us.
well, when you're talking about men, whether it be in the workplace, in the family, or in politics, it's to narrow it down to something even more or even smaller than men. It's something men have that is the thing that brings down all men and ruins everything, and that's excessive ego. And when people get to a lofty point in politics, they now consider themselves special or elite, that they can dictate what other people should be doing, even if they disagree with you. And that's the problem. People are risen to a certain level, whether they're rich or they have power or both, and they feel like they're special and they can dictate to others. And that has to be changed because it's bullshit.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it's hard to get leaders that don't get caught up in that. Even Democrats get caught up in it. I, you know, and I would be a horrible politician because I won't conform to anything. I don't go to meetings. I don't listen to shit. If I think you're a dumbass and you happen to be some guy with power, I'm going to tell you you're a dumbass. I won't last long in that kind of setting. It has to be a special kind of person. And that's the one thing I give Joe Biden credit for. There's a lot of things I don't like about Joe Biden. I think he could be stronger and more aggressive, but he knows how to play the fucking game. And he
Mhm.
does have a little sensitivity there. He's not quite the egomaniac that some of these other idiots have been.
And I think that's an asset with him, is that he
Yeah,
knows how everything works. He's been doing it for years and years and years, which is, drain the swamp. We got the same players, not good, but it is an advantage because and look how he plays the Republicans. It's so good.
every
So,
time,
yeah.
every time. I mean, he just did it with this last bill. They want to be tough, and we don't want Joe Biden to win. And he won with the whole border thing. They
Mhm.
had a messaging, Joe Biden leaves the border open. So Joe says, okay, we'll pass the bill and we'll shut the border
I
down.
know,
And
I
they say
love that.
no. He switched it on them. That talking
Loved it.
point has been taken away.
It was so great. So great. I like the Biden with they have like the laser eyes, dark
Dark
brown.
brown.
Oh my God, that's so great.
It
And
is.
whoever's writing his social media posts is just so on point. It's so good. It's so
Ha-
good.
have you been worried about this whole thing with him being too old and some people don't want to vote for him because he's too old? I
And
mean,
that's all
I
I
get
hear.
it. Yeah.
That's all I hear. And I don't like that he's that old. I don't either. Because, how many people in your life right now at that age would you think are capable of being president? Like, have all their wits about them, are physically competent, have energy, and desire? Like, who would that ever be at that age? Like, nobody. And here we have him. And but the race is the race. So he is our choice, by good or bad, that's it. He's our choice, and we have to support him because that's the best thing we've got going right now.
And that's the one thing that frustrates me. You've got the progressives in the Democratic side. They don't like all that Joe Biden has done. I don't like all that Joe Biden has done. And it's like they're fighting to get exactly what they want, all of what they want, and they don't understand the
Impossible.
process here.
Yeah. Well, at our age, we know that there is nothing perfect. You will never
No,
have anything perfect. So you
no.
have to weigh the good and the bad, and that's life. That's like life. That's the way it works.
Well, it is. And, as I've said before, with the Republicans, it's an extraordinary situation. It's not like the bad Republicans against the bad Democrats, and they're kind of even. This is literally a dumpster fire that could destroy this country. Our focus should be putting out that fire.
Mhm.
If it meant voting in Pauly Shore to be president, you should still do that to put out that fire. And then once you get past that, then you deal with the
Absolutely.
problems you got now. You can't take it
Absolutely.
all on at once. It's overwhelming and you'll just fail.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would love it if we supported some of these great women that we have. Katie Porter, Stacey Abrams. I love what's her name up in she's always fighting with everybody in Massachusetts. Can't think of her name.
Um, Massachusetts, trying to think. There are a lot of women in Congress that have great potential. In Minnesota, we have Amy Klobuchar, who does a great
Mhm.
job. Katie Porter, as you mentioned. There are a lot of great female politicians. And, I think it's about time. It's hard to imagine. We grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and the idea of having a female president, it was just out there. I mean, it was first started with Geraldine Ferraro becoming the vice presidential candidate, and that wasn't going to fly. Um, it's hard to imagine it's taken this long to people say, maybe a female president would be bad. And
Elizabeth Warren, I just
oh,
remember
Elizabeth Warren, yeah,
Pocahontas.
yeah,
Pocahontas.
right, right, right. But um, I think that time has come, and that time might come sooner than we think. Joe Biden, when he first got elected, I said there's no way he's going to run for reelection. He's too old. And I think his intention was not to run for reelection until Donald Trump got back in. And I think he honestly believes he's the one guy that can defeat Donald Trump. And it was necessary for the future of this country, his kids, his grandkids. So I don't think he wanted to run for president. I think he felt like he kind of had to finish the job.
Yeah,
And I have to wonder if after he gets elected, he doesn't retire early.
maybe. There's a lot of people that don't like Kamala Harris, and they said, "Oh, she's not doing anything." I think that it might have been the strategy of the White House to not have her in the limelight at all. And the only reason I say that is because did you ever watch Veep?
Yeah.
That show? You know how they in that show they put the vice president out like to do stupid stuff, and they just kept her out. And this is what I think's happening, right? They put her out here. They don't want any attention on her. They want it to all be on him, and that's why hasn't gotten any good press. But to me, I think she's pretty competent.
No, I think she's very competent. I've said before in 2015, when she was one of the people running for the presidency in the primary against Joe Biden, I thought she was a solid candidate. I think she's sharp. I think she's tough. I think she has enough progressiveness in her side to get things done for the country. When you hear about Joe Biden having dementia or Kamala Harris not being very good or all these things, I have to tell Democrats, think about where that's coming from. It's like Donald Trump saying that True Social is worth 5 billion. Well, that's coming from Donald Trump. You take that with a grain of salt.
Right.
This is where the Republicans have always won. It's in the messaging. They throw
Hmm.
something out in the ether, and this is the most frustrating thing to me. They'll say Joe has dementia. He can't put together a sentence. So the Republicans all start talking about it and spewing it. And eventually it gets so deep into the ether, the Democrats going, well, that must be true. I always tell people, stop listening to fucking bullshit because it's
Hmm.
coming from the Republicans. Just because
Right.
it's on the media and it's out in the ether doesn't mean it's real. Find
If you
out for
watch
yourself.
Fox, if you watch Fox News, you live in an alternate reality. Like
You
the
do.
stuff they put on there, it's unbelievable. And you really have no connection to what's really going on. I was in a pizzeria and I was stuck watching it, and I'm like, no wonder everyone's so don't understand what's happening in the world because they're not telling that group of viewers. I mean, I never watch it.
I got a comment on my TikTok from somewhere. We were talking about Fox News, and she goes, "I know it's not much, but I do it every time I can." I said, "What's that?" She says, "When I go into restaurants and there's a TV on, I'll say, 'Can I change the channel?' And they will give me the remote." She says, "I change the channel, but then I go in and block Fox News."
Mhm.
I love
I
that.
love it. I
I
love
love that. It's so petty. I love it.
that.
It, it so, so what I'm saying is that, people in this country, we were talking about fear and that, and I think this country pretty much deals a lot on fear, and this is what we've got to get out of. We've got to make people less afraid, because if Donald Trump says my shit's worth $5 billion and I'm going to get out of it, Democrats believe that. And it's not true. And it's never been true. And Donald Trump is, no matter how many times he fails, no matter how many times he's been exposed for lying, still people will get caught up in it and be afraid of it.
There's
When I
just
was,
too much out there. People don't know what's up. I
yeah.
mean, I'm overwhelmed as well, and that's why I'm very careful what I expose myself to, because there's too much misinformation and it's confusing. And if I'm out at a cocktail party and someone says, "Oh, did you hear this and this?" and I'm like, "No, I never heard of such a thing." Like, there's too much out there, and we can't even process it as fast as it's coming at us. And I don't blame people for not knowing what the truth is,
Oh, I don't
because
either.
we're the channel.
Well, and that's the thing. This is why I blame the media. I was talking to Ed about this on the podcast that aired, and he was a former news director. I actually did some news too, but um, there is no journalism anymore. It's all tabloid type shit. I mean, whether you're watching MSNBC, and when MSNBC or CNN or even Fox News says something, they're immediately allowed a certain amount of credibility because of who they are and where they're saying it from. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. They said it, so there's got to be some truth to it. Who would lie in the cable news? But the fact of the matter is, there are lies, there's misinformation, there's omitted information, and there's slanted information. And
And the
people,
reporters don't ask hard questions. They don't
right,
even ask the questions.
right, exactly, exactly, and that's why I've said Donald Trump would never have been the president of the United States if someone held his feet to the fire and asked him the questions he needed to ask. He says something crazy, they let it go, and it just floats around. They need to push back and they need to hold his feet to the fire. And that's kind of the experience I've had. I try to uh, illustrate that when I've had Trumplafucks where I'm talking to them. Um, like I went on this live for a short time with this HVAC Jeff who was on the show, who's an absolute buffoon. Um,
I know, I heard that show.
well, I was on a live of his recently until I got banned off that live because I apparently said something that was true that they didn't like. But I'll give you an example of how Trumplafucks or even the media talks. They talk in circles. They don't talk about specifics. They never hang themselves out to dry. They always cover themselves. Jeff was talking about the media and he said, "Where do you get your information?" I said, "I get my information from a number of places. I never count on one source. I try to corroborate information. And if it doesn't make sense, I don't talk about it. If I got several corroboration points and it makes sense, then I talk about it." I said, "Where do you get yours?" He says, "Direct from the source." I go, "What source is that?" He goes, "The videos." I go, "The videos? Where do the videos come from?" "Well, just the real live videos." I said, "Yeah, but somebody has to distribute those to you. Who is it?" And he could not answer that. He could not give me a specific answer where his source was from. And then he tried to pivot off onto something else. And this is what they do. They talk in circles. They make big statements, hoping you believe it, but they have no basis in fact. They have no resource that they can point to. And that's the problem. Some people get sucked into that. I mean, I could sit here and say, Donald Trump is a pedophile. You got the thing in Massachusetts, you got the thing in Florida, you got all this stuff. He's a pedophile. And I could just keep saying he's a pedophile. And eventually some people would believe it. Well, it's fucking true. But even if it wasn't true, one of the things I learned about being in radio and giving talks, how you say things, how strong your attitude when you say them, if you seem sure of yourself, there is a certain crowd of people that will believe you no matter what you say. And that's a dangerous thing if somebody's going to misuse it.
And that's why we need to invest in education so that people get some critical thinking skills and ask questions and really support students to know that they can think for themselves and that they can ask tough questions. You can ask your teachers tough questions, that they're okay. And that look at President Biden now, working around the system to dissolve some of those student loans for the teachers and the firefighters for public service. Like, that's what we were talking about earlier, is thank God that he knows how to work the system. and dissolve some of these loans, but also help students, help people with education so that we get educated, so that we're not just listening to some guy on a video and not questioning where the video comes from, you know?
Well, that's an interesting point. When we went through this whole thing with forgiving loans for college tuition, and I think it's absolutely necessary, not just for the people who will save their money, but for the future of the economy. When he did that and they took it to the Supreme Court and it failed, people would yell at Joe Biden, see, he didn't get it done. Well, it wasn't Joe Biden that didn't get it done. But most politicians would say, well, fuck it, I didn't get it done. We'll go on to something else.
He
But
had a workaround.
he had a workaround, and it's not as good and not as quick, but he's tenacious about it. I'm going to forgive this. I'm going to forgive that. I'm going to forgive this. And it's so much shit going on. The Republicans are so worried about other things that they aren't even trying to stop him doing it, and he's still getting it done. Um, uh, and some people say, well, why isn't he crowing about it? Why isn't he talking about it? As long as it's not getting too much attention, the Republicans don't care. They only care about perception and attention. So by keeping it on the down low, he's getting more shit done.
I
And
love it.
he's creating goodwill with all those people he's helping. And then when we get to November, I tell people, don't think this whole loan forgiveness thing is over. If the Democrats get power, we're going to see some dramatic changes because we have to. If we have generations that can't afford or qualify for houses, that's going to fuck up the
Yeah,
economy.
terrible. And we're there. We're there.
Yeah, we are there. They aren't going to be able to buy cars. They aren't going to be able to houses. They aren't going to be able to go on trips. They aren't going to be able to do anything.
Educate their children. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Do you think we're going to see I think we're going to see a dramatic change in education. It's almost become untenable that you go to school and go into debt for $50,000 to $100,000 and make $30,000 a year. Financially, it makes
And
no
do it.
sense.
Impossible. And I think it was you who said we're going to see more people going towards certifications and like smaller term goals so that they can get work and they can go from there and continue to get educated in a more of a piecemeal fashion. But that works too, I think.
Well, like Joe Biden, people will find the workarounds. And if people aren't going to get their college degrees, the people who need to hire people will have to help in those workarounds. I mean, what's happening with college right now, they're kind of pricing themselves out of business. They keep getting greedy and they want more and more and more, but there's going to come a breaking point where people can't afford it and just don't do it. And then the employers will have to come up with different ways to accept people into the jobs. And they are with the
Well, I
certifications and
think we
online
already
shit.
reached that point. The elites will always be sending their children to Ivy Leagues and beating the system and making sure their kid, jumps the line. And that's always going to happen. But for the majority, it's going to be a different path. And I think was it Joe Biden who said about community colleges being free? Was that
Yeah.
him?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be awesome. Like that's what we need.
Yeah. We need, well, and I've said before regarding college or post-secondary education, um, it should be absolutely free to everybody and not as a favor to the students, because I've said anytime we have a crisis in this country, the government pours money at it. We
Mhm.
have a hurricane, we have an earthquake, we have fires, whatever. We pour money on it, fix it to bring it back to where it should be. And we have a crisis of fucking stupid in this country. Clearly, it sounds like I'm joking,
I
but
know. I agree.
you just talk to anybody on the street that's normal. It's truly amazing what people don't know.
It's almost, sometimes it feels like it's willful stupidity. Like they don't want to look. They don't want to look underneath and see what's really there. Do you feel that too?
Oh yeah, I feel it all the time. I get people that I've known, not maybe not so much anymore. They'll go, "Oh, the news is so bad, so negative. I just don't even want to know about it. I'll just watch Wheel of Fortune." And
Right. And they're all the same. All the candidates, I don't have Republican debate. They're all the same.
yeah,
They're all liars. But yeah.
and I get frustrated with them. I say, "Do you really believe that?" And they say, "Yeah, I just don't want to deal with it." And I think that's what a lot of people feel. They don't want to deal with it because it's bad news or negative or doom and gloom. Um, Normal people would want to fight against it. People like yourself, people like me, people like the folks that listen to the Rational Boomer podcast and on TikTok. People are worried about the prospects of the future, and we understand that we have to fight. We didn't win freedom in this country from England without fighting. We didn't save the country from slavery without fighting. There has to be some fighting. It doesn't have to be violent and physical, but there has to be some fight in all of us. That's always been kind of the saving grace with America, but we've become complacent and we become lazy and we become passive. And unfortunately, in this world, there's enough pushback where you can't be fucking passive.
There's too many opportunities for numbing, being on your phone, shopping, watching TV. People are just taking the easy way out, and I understand why, because it's kind of overwhelming. But I think that we have to take a systematic approach to dismantling what's occurred.
What's been really inspiring to me in doing the TikTok thing. I had no idea, and TikTok and the podcast, I had no idea what was going to happen. I felt like I might, get some traction and it would be fun and all that stuff. But I think there's a feeling with young people that old people like us are just sitting back, relaxing, writing out our retirement, collecting our checks, and not really giving a shit what happens to those young people. In fact, they go out and say that. So when I started doing the TikTok thing, I thought, oh, okay, this will be fun. I'm just going to speak my mind, get it off my chest. It'll be kind of cathartic. But I was surprised by how many people. I mean, if you go to my TikTok, the vast majority of my people that follow me are 45 to probably 75. I got some younger folks too. And the people that come to the podcast, similar age range. That tells me there's a lot of people of our age range that aren't sitting in rocking chairs, that are only thinking about knitting and what watching old Matlock shows. They're engaged, they're concerned, and they're ready to fight. And that tells me a lot about this country in the future. We may be old, but we're still a big voter bloc in this country. In spite of the fact we might want to be pushed aside by the young, we still hold a lot of power and we hold most of the money. So we should flex that muscle.
And we're smart because we've had years of experience. We've, been to the school of hard knocks. We've had our education. So we have all that wisdom. I mean, this is the time where we have wisdom and we have time. So we should be able to do it.
Well, that's the one thing I learned when I was young. I was young. My father really wasn't in the picture. I had a house. I had kids. There was a lot of things happening that I didn't know what to do with. I never had experience with it. And I would always go to the older men that I work with and say, look, man, I got this problem. What happened when you had that problem? And sometimes they'd give me good advice. Sometimes they gave me bad advice and told me it didn't work out. But when you're dealing with life and trying to get through it, information is hugely valuable. If you know what to expect before you get slammed, you can at least prepare for it and maybe come out the other side a little bit better. And sometimes people want to poo-poo what old people tell them, but you have to understand they've gone through it. And there's nothing more valuable coming up against a problem or a tragedy to know what somebody else did when it happened to them. It gives you some information to deal with the situation you've got in front of you.
Mm-hmm. So there is value in us old people.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. We're smart. We're compassionate and sexy as fuck.
And rational.
And rational. Well, and the whole thing with the rational boomer is just something I pulled out of my ass. I was trying to create a contrast, boomer and rational. That seemed like an oxymoron. And it just kind of stuck. But I think calm, rationale, and taking as much emotion out of things make life easier. You got to make decisions. And if you're panicking, you're almost always going to make the wrong decision. And I think a lot of people, I see it with my own family, my wife, my kids, something happens, they panic. Oh my God. And
fear-based decisions are not good decisions.
No. And we know that because we've done it. It's not like we've always been brilliant. It wasn't until
we paid the price. Yeah.
You get your ass kicked enough, you learn a lesson.
Mhm.
Hopefully you do. Um, you said you were a Republican and a conservative. And you said that with a certain amount of shame. I think what we have to say is that Republicans and conservatives back in our day were a far different animal.
Oh, they were.
We don't have Republicans or conservatives anymore. That's not what they are. They're a rogue fucking faction of cult members. They aren't Republican or conservative in any sense of the word. So you shouldn't feel shameful of that. I mean, I
Well,
think
it was part of my journey, and it's, now I'm at a completely different place. But, well, thanks for that, Mike. I feel better about myself.
well, you should. It's funny. There was a phrase that I can't remember how it goes exactly. If you're a young man and are not liberal, you don't have a heart. If you're an old man and you're not conservative, you don't have a brain. I think that's how it goes. But the interesting thing is, we're getting a lot of people that were once conservatives as we get older and becoming more liberal. I think I think what that says about us is that we have some compassion and concern for our descendants, our kids, our grandkids. We see what's on track for them, and we want better for them.
We do. We do.
And I know I'm really looking forward to my granddaughter, because my granddaughter's a cute little girl, but she's going to be a kick-ass boss bitch. She's already bossing me around. She takes no shit from anybody. She's in everybody's face. I know it's driving her mom and dad and the other side of the family nuts. I said, do not stop her. That's the kind of girl we need going into the future. If I die and I know she's there, I'll feel comfortable because I
Yeah.
know the future's good.
Yep. I have a 9-year-old granddaughter, and she's also very saucy. And then I have a 2-month-old grandson, and then I'm going to have another grandson in June. And I want a better world for them, a better world.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like you say, things are getting tougher for young people now. Now it's an opportunity for us to at least make the effort to try to make it better. And people say, you can't just fix everything. And I know that. All I'm trying to do is trying to create a groundswell. I can't fix everything, but if you hear something and you tell somebody and they tell somebody, hopefully we can get enough people talking about it so that it exposes what's wrong and we hopefully get something fixed. I don't know if I can fix anything, but when I die, I at least can say I tried. And you can say you tried. We can all, that's all we can do at this point. Beyond that,
That's
yeah.
it.
Well, Ilona, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure to talk to listeners, you especially. It's nice to talk to intelligent, articulate folks that have some insights, um, and I find it incredibly valuable. It makes my show 100 times better when I have somebody else sitting next to me as opposed to this face talking about the same shit for an hour.
Thank you, Mike. It was a pleasure. And I hope that if a clumsy, awkward person like myself can come on your show, that other ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen who are shy will come on, but especially ladies. I want all our voices to be heard, but we haven't had a lot of opportunities. And I think Mike would welcome anyone on.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we have Old Soul. We had Kristen on. She hasn't been on for a while. She was a very bright woman. Hopefully she'll come back. Or Christy, I think. Christy. Um, but yeah, I'm all for interaction with whoever's out there. If you're smart enough to listen to the Rational Boomer podcast, you're smart enough to be a fucking guest. That's
Yeah,
just the
all
way.
right. Woo!
Why don't we remind folks where they can see you? Because you obviously have some great insights and some great information. You have a Substack and you have a podcast. So please remind folks where they can find that.
Sure. So I'm going to post the interview that I had with Mike on my website, which is also my Substack. So you'll see all the podcasts and the YouTube links, and it's www.thepebbleinYourShoe.com.
Absolutely. Check it out. I've listened to it. It's a great show. And like she said, I'll be on the show, and it was great fun to do. She's got some great insights. By all means, check out Ilona.
All
Ilona,
right.
thank you very much for coming on, and uh, this isn't typically with listeners, it isn't a one-off. So plan to come back.
Okay, I will, Mike. It wasn't terrible.
No, you were wonderful. And anytime you feel an urge to come on, just send me an email and we'll put you on
All right. Thank you.
ASAP. For those listening, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.